I have probably underfueled, like chronically underfueled. So probably not having enough insulin on board, maybe not covering it all. And as a result, not taking in, and I've known this, and now they're saying the winning ultra runners, non T1s, are what's this 90 to 120 grams of carbs per hour, thousands and thousands and thousands of calories being pumped in. So our bodies, whether we're T1 or not, need all those carbs to fuel the calories I take in during an ultra versus how much Strava tells me I'd probably burn. Yeah, I'm probably underfueled. And that's probably something I need to work on, is maybe micro dosing more or mini dosing and taking in more fuel as I go.
I kind of learned quickly that real food is a good choice. While I have focused more on super long distances and I've only run, a few actual races that were over 100 miles, my strategy has been that when your body is telling you to eat, get what you're craving, keep moving if you can, but slow down. I mean, part of the deal with walking is not just that it makes the food easier to eat, but it activates the parasympathetic nervous system and drops stress hormones and allows your body to actually store that fuel as opposed to dumping into the bloodstream. Eventually, you're going to tap out of glycogen or something like that if you don't slow down and sort of fuel and rest along the way. You can't really consider it separately from rest or slowing down or things like that. That it has to be part of an integrated strategy.
Welcome to the T1 Determined podcast, where we bridge the conversation of type 1 diabetes and endurance. I'm Joseph Anthony Marcello, an endurance athlete and a mountaineer. As someone living with T1D, I'm on a mission to uncover and share science-backed information that drives optimal performance and longevity. And as a storyteller, I'm here to explore and share incredible feats in T1D sports physiology. Let's tackle this together. Today, we host our first ever T1D Panel, where we sit down with the top experts in a specific sport or field and dive into an intense, overarching discussion. I am thrilled to be joined by 3 ultramarathon athletes. Andrew Meisler has completed 45 trail ultras, including multiple 50Ks and 50 milers, 4 100Ks, and 3 100 milers. Don Muchow, joining us once more, is a legend who has self-imposed runs across states such as Texas, as well as the entire country, from ocean to ocean. Chris Roome is a younger ultra runner who has completed multiple 50Ks and a 50 miler. At the time of recording, I was personally training for my first 50K, and since, I've successfully completed that 50K race and am actively training for an upcoming 50 miler. Between the 4 of us, we span decades and generations of ultra athlete experiences. As we build this podcast from the ground up, your support is crucial for our continued growth. Wherever you're listening, please share this episode and others with anyone you think might benefit. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and X at T1D_endurance, and on Facebook and YouTube at T1 Determined, and visit our website, T1Determined.net. Please also like and subscribe, and you can leave up to a 5-star review wherever you're listening. Before we dive in, the topics discussed and the recommendations shared by myself and our guests are personal experiences and not medical prescriptions. Always consult your healthcare team and medical professionals before making any changes to your daily routines, management, or therapies. And now, for our panel discussion about type 1 diabetes and ultramarathons with Andrew Meisler, Don Muchow, and Chris Roome. Chris, Don, and Andy, thank you for all joining me today here on the T1 Determined podcast. In the lead up to this recording, I've used the word excited and hyped and pumped. Today, we have ultra runners through the generations. We have your legends, Don Muchow and Andy Meisler, who have run more races than I can count across continents. Between the 2 of them, they are people that you want to look up to in this ultra endurance world. And then you have a younger Chris Roome, who's done 50Ks, 50 milers, Spartan races. He's brought a new flavor to the endurance world and a new appetite to it. He has his eyes set on the Blackbeard 100. So we know Chris is in the midst of his ultra career, growing as each race passes and goes and the training sessions and everything. And then you have myself who at the time of recording, at the time of release, it'll be after, but at the time of recording, I have my first 50K this upcoming week. So you have somebody who's still very new to the ultra world, starting his first ultra. Um, with that being said, I don't have this first topic or question thrown out to a specific person, but for one, each of you and possibly myself to answer or just bounce off of running and type 1 diabetes. What specifically about running helps manage the type 1 diabetes? Because I mean, it's something that, at least in my opinion, you can say is both physical and mental. You can see benefits from running just from in your blood glucose levels, maybe not during, but after. Or you can see just a release of like a mental release when you're having a very loaded day. So I don't know if Chris, you want to start and then we can go to Andy and Don. What is it about running for you with your type 1 diabetes that's like, what's the why?
Um, I want I want to say it's simple, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to articulate it right. Running correlates over to my type 1 diabetes management. Through running, I enjoy the challenge, challenging myself and pushing myself further and further. And the mindset that I've developed around running these longer distances has carried over into my type 1. So it's not just the challenge of how do I do better with my type 1, but it's putting myself in these ultra running and extreme endurance event situations where I learn more about how my body reacts to stressors leading up to, during, and post, where I can then take that knowledge and use it to tighten the type 1 control in everyday life, not just in the endurance sports.
And Andy, what about you?
Yeah, it's a really complex question, and I had not really prepared or thought about it. I mean, on the one hand, running, and I've been running for close to 30 years and always been doing. I think I did my first, century bike ride, well over 30 years ago, 35 years ago. Always played sports, always. Yeah, I mean, glycemic control in the moment when running can be I don't know what we can say on a podcast. It's kind of a shit show, right? So, it
Anything
really
is allowed
depends.
here.
Yeah, I kind of thought so. I mean, it really depends. I think for me, some of what Chris said that, engaging in running, endurance sports, running in particular, it definitely informs how you think about managing your diabetes. It promotes a kind of toughness and sturdiness. Also think, certainly Don and I who've been living with diabetes for a very long time, you learn I mean, as a child, long before you start running, that you have to be flexible, you have to adapt, you have to have, so there's kind of this bidirectional relationship. Running helps on the one hand, running helps manage diabetes. And on the other hand, having diabetes really, I think, helps you become an endurance athlete because you learn mental endurance and
Yeah.
flexibility and adapting to situations. So that's a partial answer.
Yeah, I mean, I always said that I've never gotten so healthy in my life until I was diagnosed with type 1. Not that I was like out of my way unhealthy growing up, but the amount of like cosmic brownies and goldfish that I would eat just being a kid and not even like, or just not having the knowledge of like 6 sugars in my pumpkin spice coffee from Dunkin' Donuts, like before type 1. It's a wonder I didn't get type 2. But it's just like I didn't have that knowledge base until I was a type 1. I always wanted to be an athlete. And then it's almost like type 1 gave me the tools to know how to fuel. And not that I don't treat myself nowadays, but it's just a world of a difference.
I would say one last thing I meant to say is that obviously being an endurance athlete, running and maintaining weight and cardiovascular fitness is just so good for long term. All the complications, the cardiovascular risk factors, and so forth. You're mitigating against those if you have cardiovascular health. So that's like a huge long term benefit for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Yep.
you always say, Joe, like type 1 is your sport, like you're
Yeah.
mastering craft. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would definitely agree. Andy made a real good point about I guess, sort of type 1 giving you a bit of an education about um, how to run more thoughtfully. with regards to what's happening in your body. Um, for me, my introduction to running was back in 2004. And I'll try to save you the entire history of it, but a little bit of a side journey to abbreviate the conversation. When I was in grad school, I was robbed at knife point, and the way the robbery worked was that there were a bunch of kids in hoodies and backwards baseball caps hanging out by the entrance to the Chicago Elevated. So when I went up the stairs, I got as far away from those guys as I could, and I was standing and talking to a guy wearing a blue button-down shirt and a pair of khakis, and that was the guy who pulled the knife on me. So I my introduction to running was sort of along those lines. Um, I had already committed to losing weight. I was back in 2004. I think I weighed about a little over 210 pounds. And by comparison, I'm 152 right now. But when I first had my introduction to running, it was kind of a, either face the guy in the hoodies or face the guy with a knife. And my only choice when I learned that I had proliferative retinopathy was to either run scared, low blood sugars, or run scared from high blood sugars, or figure it the heck out. And I decided I had been running for 40 some odd years from from low blood sugars by letting my sugar run high enough that I would never have problems with lows, only to experience vision problems before I was 42. And I made myself a promise that I would be more active in addition to working on my diet. And I signed up for my first 5K in 2004. I think it was a turkey trot in November. And I had my retinopathy treatment, I think, and it was in June or July. And I don't know where it was going to go, but I knew that the most dangerous thing was to continue living with uncontrolled highs and lows. And I found that even running the 5K helped bring my blood sugars in line. The lows were not as low and the highs were not as high. I was not at that point familiar with some of the more extreme cases, like the effects, as Chris pointed out, of stress. But I was yet to learn that. So as far as why running, I mean, I felt like I had no choice. It was either that or go back into the cave with either the bear or the cheetah.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a serious situation that you run into in a city like Chicago, but it's interesting how you use it as an analogy to type 1 diabetes. Because, you can compare that the low is the knife being held against you, and the guys in the hoodies are the high. And it's just like you want to avoid the high, but it's the lows that you really like.
yeah, the lows will kill you,
Yeah.
or at least leave you bleeding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I won't say that I ran scared from anything regarding type 1, but it was my first realization that I had to think in a crisis and not just bury my head in letting my blood sugar run high, because that had a cost associated with it.
What do you think? So when somebody starts running, especially as a type 1 diabetic, there's so many fluctuations. So, like, Don, you're around the 5K to begin with. Before you're running hundreds of miles, you're starting with the 5K, which is 3 point something miles. There's so many fluctuations, especially when you start and you're not used to running, within your blood sugar while you're running. But, like, how do you convince other type 1 diabetics to kind of either push through that or learn about it? Because the benefits on the other side are so much better outside of running.
Um, I honestly don't know. I think it starts with telling them that it is scary, and acknowledging that you're not some kind of superhuman who has no fear. Um, back when I did the USA run, there were a lot of people who said I could never be like you. And I thought to myself, man, I could never be like me until I was. You don't want people to think of anyone who's had any success with walking the tightrope of type 1 and physical activity that this is something that, they know the secret handshake, they joined the diabetic Illuminati or whatever. There's no secret knowledge there. It's about being unscared enough to face what you don't know and to get to know it. I tell people sometimes type 1 is like a snake in the car. You can get scared like hell and crash your car, or you can learn the snake's habits. What time of day is it crankiest? When does it bite? What part of the car does it want to be in? And kind of either avoid that or work with it. But you're never going to get the snake out of the car.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like that saying that the treasure you seek is in the cave you fear.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That's a really better way of putting it, I think.
And it's the opposite of the old saying, "The devil you know is better than the devil you don't," because you fear taking on something new, running a 5K, running 100 miles, running a 50K this weekend. Very stoked for you. But there is for sure a fear. And I don't know about you, Don, having run a bunch of ultras and run across the country. That's very badass, way beyond anything I've done. But there's like a sense of nerves, as there is for everybody, even non-T1s, normal, healthy people. You line up at the starting line of an ultra, and there's nerves. You have no idea what's going to happen, and just multiply that tenfold if you've got T1, or what your blood sugars are going to do and how you're going to feel. But that fear in the devil is that you don't know is still way better than the devil you do, which is doing nothing and going down what is ultimately going to be a long-term bad road.
Yeah, because theoretically, you could have even well-controlled blood glucose your entire life, but if you're sedentary, other health metrics are going to go out. So it's not saying to run ultras all the time, but it's just saying even as a type 1 diabetic, we almost have a responsibility to focus on it and focus on our health outside of type 1.
Completely.
One of you guys had mentioned that in many ways type 1 was kind of a gift. And this last year, I've been through quite a few meetings with doctors regarding, I guess, what I would call a globally compromised cardiac flow reserve, basically meaning I only have low gears. I can't really push my heart rate up to 140 like some really hard ass. I know I can't go hardcore like a lot of guys do. And so one of the challenges for me has been to realize that it's teaching me something. Every time I fail with type 1, if I'm failing right, I learn something and I come back smarter. And I think you asked earlier what I would say to somebody is that, first of all, don't judge yourself by your numbers. And second of all, don't be afraid to fail. This is how you learn.
Thanks to your support, the T1 Determined podcast is growing fast. We're releasing more episodes and working on our documentary projects, T1 Kili, T1 Denali, and T1 Americas, showing what is possible with type 1 diabetes and endurance alongside elite T1D athletes. To help us help more T1Ds, we're opening up sponsor spots on the show. If you own or run a diabetes or athletic-related business, here is your opportunity to connect with a dedicated niche audience through personal host-read ads. If you want to be a trusted representative of our mission to educate and empower type 1 diabetics and introduce your product to a global market, consider partnering with us so we can level up together. Send an email to podcast@t1determined.net to start the conversation. We are so grateful that our listeners have brought the T1 Determined podcast this far, and we are excited for what's ahead. What I'm even gathering here is that as physical as something like either finding your health or just running in general is, most of it is the mental. The mental piece that you build, but just by learning, like the hurdles are more mental than they are physical.
I would agree. When I first started running 5Ks, I was profoundly aware of the fact that I didn't know anything about running. Then for a while, as I moved up in distance, I started to feel like I knew a little something about running. And then in 2017, when I ran my first 100 miler, I discovered somewhere between mile 64 and mile 90 that the stress that I was allowing myself to feel was actually impeding blood sugar control. I had gotten so stressed out that I couldn't get my sugar below 300 milligrams per deciliter, which I don't recall what that is in millimoles, but probably about 18 or something like that. Pretty bad. And I sat down on the edge of the van on the side of the road because we had a support van. And I had a yogurt. It's probably 150 calories, Dannon or something like that. And it should have made my blood sugar spike, but simply sitting down, calming down, and eating a yogurt actually made it drop by 100 points. And that was when I thought I knew a lot about running and type 1. And so I think you have to understand and be aware that there's always something to learn, even when you think you figured it out. And by the time I got to the eastern shore of the U.S. during the what I call the big run, I realized that I had come back around to the point where I wasn't sure what I knew about running, but I had run. And I think it's good to realize that there's always something to learn, even when you reach the finish line. There are mental life lessons. There are lessons about endurance and perseverance that pertain not just to running, but to type 1. And as I get into this sort of cardiac phase, the complications everyone said would come no matter what I did. I'm having to realize that I lean more on the mental piece.
I would just play off something with Don, your story about, running 100-miler. And your first one was in 17. Ironically, the last one I finished was in 2017.
Oh,
I've
wow.
got some
Okay, yeah.
50-milers and 100Ks under my belt since then, and
Cool.
1 or 2 100-mile DNFs. But yeah, I'm still whether at 62 and slowing down considerably, whether I can actually have another 100 in me. That remains to be seen. But it's fascinating that you were running 300s and you sit down and have a Dannon yogurt and relax a little bit. Your sugar drops, which I think I'm imagining myself in that situation, and I've been in that situation. But stopping and eating a yogurt, I don't know. I think I would have spiked into like ketosis. So I mean, that's the whole point. Is we are all different. So you can talk to 100 running T1s and or take your own experiences into account. And my experience has been like other people's experiences don't necessarily tell you what your body's going to do. And your own experience does not tell you in that day, in that moment, what your body is going to do. No, I'm not on a pump, and that may be a whole different, and I know on your page, Don, a lot of people say pump, mixed reviews about ultra endurance events and being on a pump. That's a whole other topic. But yeah, it's very hard for me to predict what my sugar will do. Do I sit down? Do I keep going? Do I take, do I cover? Do I not cover? And these are all things we have to learn from others, but also learn from ourselves and learn from the moment, because you may have done it 100 times. Like, oh, today's different. So you have to be really willing. It's very mental. And that's willing to go on the fly and read the temperature, read the room of your body and what it's doing in the day. And, part of that makes it maddening and part of that makes it challenging and exciting, right? That's all the mental part.
At the same point too, there's so many different variables. Like when I talk to people about running my ultras, I spent months and months and months of training runs finding what gives me the best chance for success on race day. But because it works on Monday, the conditions can be exactly the same on Tuesday and it could be completely different.
I took the same insulin. I ate the same food. I'm going at the same pace, same temperature, same hydration, and it's like a different day entirely.
But to that point, in that case, I like what you said of like reacting on the fly, because then to me, training itself is learning how to react on the fly. So you're on Monday and you're training Monday and it does a certain thing Monday, but at least Monday you're learning how to react to what it does on Monday. So on race day, you'll know that you can react in a certain way.
And that goes back to what Don was saying about not being afraid. You've got to go out there and go through those learning experiences, because I won't call them failures, because I learned what not to do in a situation. You need to go through those to be able to have the best chance for success to compete on race day and finish.
Yes. And if you expect complete predictability based on what you've been doing in training, whatever, you might be in trouble, right? I think predicting there's I'm a psychologist after all. There's a professor who's a great researcher who's coined this term iterative flexibility. And it really applies to like how we adapt to stress and trauma in our lives, but it applies to everything. Iterative and flexible. We take in things in iterations as they come and we flex in response to them. And that's really good coping. It's good coping in life. And it's very much good coping with T1, especially when you're running and you're pushing your body and there's so many variables at play. We have to just, read the signs. And as you say, Chris, training, you learn not just you get your body stronger and fitter, but you also learn how to react and how to respond, right?
I heard somebody say a while back, I think it was Einstein or someone like that, he said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But my version of that is that type 1 insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to subtweet the bolus, the rage boluses, because we've all been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I had
What always gets me on the ultras is when I complete the run, when I have the hormone dump from the liver. That's my Achilles heel. 1 unit of insulin is enough to catch me and bring me down. Some days I need like 15 units of insulin to catch me and bring me down. And that's the biggest unknown for me when it comes to my endurance races. Is like once I stop the physical activity and my body turns off into the recovery mode, that response, whether it's cortisol or any of the other hormones that get dumped, there's no way to measure that. So there's really nothing to go off of. And it's a very slippery slope. That's what I find to be the hardest with endurance running.
I have that same experience, and not just post ultra, but post a 1 to 2 hour training run. Some days I'm good and my sugar stays pretty stable after, and other times it's spiking and I cover within a unit or 2 or 3. 15 might kill me, but I'm not as big as you are. But yeah, no, it just keeps spiking. And that does not seem to be very predictable. So
I had a very interesting experience in Odessa in 2019. So this was during my first run across Texas. And I was on a road. I had tried to make a route that was as safe as I could. But given that my goal was to run a route that ran entirely through Texas, I had to go through oil country. And the rumor, and it's true, is that it's basically a lawless badlands out there. People drive 80 miles an hour on the shoulder, which makes it very hard to find a place to run. And I was maybe 5 miles from Odessa, really close to the end of the day. I had already run about 35 miles that day. And some motorists stopped and said, "You need to get off this road. It's not safe for pedestrians." I later learned it was like the most dangerous or one of the most dangerous roads in Texas. So I was completely full of adrenaline. I did not stop to eat. My sugar was running high, of course, because of the adrenaline. And when I got to Odessa and we, packed things up, got into the hotel for the night, my sugar was like incredibly high, like 350. And I dosed like crazy for it. I had noticed throughout the day that no matter what I did, I could not get it down. And we sat down to eat. And I could feel it dropping, and I thought, great, it's finally dropping now. And within an hour or two, my blood sugar was in the 20s, and my wife had gotten the glucagon out, and it raised it to 40. So, it basically kept me conscious, but I had already dumped so much glycogen that the glucagon was not that effective. And I could very well have passed away that night because of the danger in that situation. So one of the lessons that I learned was that, and this is the kind of thing that I feared when I started running, was that hammering too hard with the insulin could put me in a dangerous place. And one of the things that I learned as I began to learn more about running is that there is that risk. You have to pay more attention than you think to recovery, as Chris had pointed out. It's one of the most important parts of the sport. And it doesn't seem fair that we have to pay so much attention to recovery and everyone can just go chow down on a plate of pizza and plate of spaghetti rather, or a half a pizza or something. And but I think one of the things that you learn is that you can do these things, but you have to do them carefully. The fear that things will go bad is justifiable, but you can't go hide in a corner because it's dangerous in the corners. You've got to get out there and learn how to deal with the fear. And I think that's the real point. Harkening back to your earlier question about what you would tell someone who's just getting started, is that, yeah, it is scary, but you're not alone. And your fears are justified, but that doesn't mean that hiding from them is okay.
So I think we're all definitely afraid, and no pun intended, but definitely afraid of lows. I'll give an example. Somebody actually reached out to me earlier this week, a coach asking about their client, who's a type 1 diabetic and is running. And this person is almost frustrated that their blood glucose during their performance during the races were high. And in a mental and physical way, because there was definitely physical applications that could happen during this, felt as though the body was kind of revolting against this person during the performance. So like the blood sugar was at 250 milligrams per deciliter. And then all of a sudden this person felt cramps and this person felt dehydrated, which is very true. At the same time, to your point, Don, is like if you just crash a bunch of insulin in you during this run, that's not the proper reaction. It's like, how do you explain to an audience that it is sometimes okay to run with higher blood glucose levels and almost push through, and that the rest of your body is not shutting down? Not to say that it's good that you're at 350 for an extended period of time, but saying that it is possible to run through those higher levels until you're in a controlled environment to let it over time get back into normal.
And I would say in micro dose insulin, and that's been a learning experience for me. If I'm high, I have one very clear memory of a race. It's a legendary race in Virginia, Hellgate 100K. It's really 66.6 miles. Hence, Hellgate is probably, I don't know how 666, and it's a famous ultra running legend guy who's the race director. Starts at midnight, runs through the Blue Ridge throughout the night. And I was slowing down and not doing very well. And I was running high and I was somewhere near mile, probably 45. And I took maybe closer to 50. And I took what I didn't think was very much insulin, but within 45 minutes, I was crashing low. And I ended up DNFing that race at about mile 50. But yeah, don't microdose. And this also, just to say, it harkens back to your initial question, Joe, about like, running and its impact on blood glucose control and how it benefits your diabetes. In the moment, Don, your stories are really apt, and the same with yours, Chris, about the post-run, kind of spike. In the moment, while you're running, I think I said this on one of your on your post, Chris. Like, I'd rather cruise along at 220 or maybe even 250 starts to feel a little high, but well in the 200s rather than be running at 150 and feeling like, man, I could be at 80 and dropping any minute. So like learning to tolerate, how long are you out running for? Like maybe 6 or 7 hours in a 50K, or maybe 30 hours in a 100 miler. But like, okay, I'm willing to run along for a day in the 200s if the benefit to my overall health and cardiovascular health and everything is okay, and not worry about keeping like close blood sugar control during a long run. This is probably not safe or realistic. That's just my own personal experience.
Yeah, and I think that goes right back to finding out what works and what doesn't work for you. I remember I had told Joe, and I think I put it in the blog post I sent to you, Don. When I ran my 50 mile, we got caught in a thunderstorm at like mile 20 or mile 30, and the weight of the torrential rains and the shirt ripped my pump site out. But I had learned from multiple other training runs to carry backup insulin with me. So I spent the remaining 20 miles microdosing to mimic a basal rate so I could at least have the insulin to transport the fuel to my muscles to get me through. Now, it wasn't ideal. It wasn't optimal. I ran a little bit higher because I didn't have the control that I had with all the training runs on the pump, but I was able to microdose and keep myself from DNFing the race because I had found the area, the range of blood sugars I needed to be in.
Mhm.
And I had been caught in training runs where the pump site came out and I didn't have insulin to take. And I found very quickly I can't push through without the insulin because my body just stops working for me.
Yeah.
So, like, finding that range and finding what worked for me, I was able to make the contingency plans to then deal with something on race day. Like, okay, it's not the end of the world. This had happened before. This is why I have this. This is what I'm going to do. Now I just need to pay attention a little bit more so I don't get caught in a bad situation. And I was able to make it through the race because I had plenty of sugar on me and I was microdosing the insulin. So I was able to keep it started seesawing, but I was able to bounce up and down within the threshold where I could still perform and get through the race. But I think that goes back to, like we were saying, you got to find what works for you, because some people may not be able to run it at 250, 300. Some people may not be able to run under 150,
Yeah.
got to go out there
Yeah.
and figure it out.
And that also goes back
Exactly.
to what else is in your body, because your blood glucose levels could be at a certain threshold between 150 and 180. But is that a 150 to 180 when you have no electrolytes? When you actually have no water, maybe you have too much electrolytes, where you have no protein and you're like running on an empty stomach. So it goes back to correlating of your blood sugar will react based off other metrics within of how you treated yourself before and during the run as well.
So, as kind of a follow on to that, if you don't mind my injecting a question here,
Totally.
I know that all of us on the podcast today are in some way acquainted with ultra. We may be at different stages of our exploration of that, but I'd love to hear what everyone thinks about fueling strategies, um, in terms of the macronutrients, as well as the timing and so forth, and what works and doesn't work for you.
Don, I'm so glad you asked this because personally, selfishly, this is the question I've wanted from this panel.
So it took me probably about 12 months of training runs to really dial in nutrition for me. It was a lot of the find out what doesn't work to find out what works. But it came down to finding the insulin profile first. I have a running profile where I have a 40% basal rate. My correction rate is cut in half. My target glucose is 170 instead of 110. So it's not activity mode. It's not a 50%. I kind of played with everything to, again, get that gives me the best chance to succeed profile with running. Once I was able to dial that in is when I moved into fuel. And fueling wise, if I'm doing, so this is pretty much my strategy for anything over a half marathon distance. Anything under a half marathon, I don't really have too much other than like 30 grams of carbs before I start, and then I carry what I need. But if I'm going into these longer distance runs, if I'm running marathon 50K, 50 mile, I'll take on 40 to 60 grams of carbs about 2 hours before the race. I'll cover half of it. So I kind of get myself to my upper threshold. Then about 25 minutes before the start of the race, I'll have a gel to kind of top off everything. My gels are about 15 grams of carbs. I won't cover that either. My race profile goes on 3 hours before my race starts. And then it's all based off of, there's a couple variables, whether it be temperature, if it's raining, if it's sunny, the elevation. I will generally take on 20 to 40 grams of carbohydrates every 30 to 40 minutes and not cover for it. And the rate of exertion is burning off the sugar kind of level with with the carb intake. So I'm not having to cover anything throughout the races. But at that point too, I keep the race profile on because I need that insulin on board to transport those carbohydrates to the muscles to be able to keep performing during the race. And I think that's why I kind of have so much trouble at the end of the race trying to figure out what's happening, because I have all those uncovered carbs in my body I'm burning off everything, and then my body dumps all the recovery hormones. So it's like it's a giant soup of I don't know what's going on. But it's generally when it comes to fueling for me, it's 20 to 40 grams every 40 to 60 minutes.
That's interesting. I had personally developed something I called the rule of 30, which is very similar to what you're talking about, which was 30 grams of carbs 30 minutes before you start, then every 30 minutes, 30 grams of carbs, and then stop 30 minutes before you finish a race.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's easy to remember. So, Andy, what's your strategy?
Well, this is a very I have much less of a strategy than you guys do, and some of it has to do with having it's just a little bit of background history for me. So having been diagnosed at age 3 in 1967, um, I wasn't even on there was short-acting insulin, but it was not part of my regimen. It was like, take a bolus of NPH in the morning and then just go about your day. And there was no glucose testing, as you probably remember, Don, in 72.
Yeah.
Glucometers came out probably in the early 80s, but believe it or not, I did not own a glucometer until 1992, when I was in a serious car accident and, had surgery. I was in the hospital. My blood sugar was 600 post-surgery. Um, and I think it was then that I got on Lantus and Humalogs to cover. But so I had a glucometer not till the early 90s. And I know this is going to sound shocking, but I did not get a CGM until I'm coming up on 3 years. So
You've been running
I
ultras without the CGM.
I started running ultras in 2010. Sometimes I didn't even have a glucometer on me. I'd have it in a drop bag, or if I had crew, they'd have it at an aid station, and I would test, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm 60. No wonder I feel like crap. I better eat something." Or, "Oh, I'm at 220. Okay, I'm just gonna not eat for a while." And this is partly my personality. I'm very compulsive about certain things related to work, especially. But when it's comes to running, historically, I've just not been very compulsive. So it's still a learning curve for me. I will say now I have a CGM that does help a lot. I've probably I like Untapped, which are the maple syrup things. A part of what I've dealt with fueling is like when you run really long, and especially if it's hot, I usually find by like the 5 or 6 hour mark, I have a hard time stomaching, like, oh my God, I can't take another gel or drink anything, or like food is not great. So I get not, I mean, my first ultra, it's like, oh, I've never been like so nauseated and puking, at this stage. So it's all a learning curve. So I do try to take in a gel or two at least per hour. I drink, some kind of, um, electrolyte drink with carbs, like Scratch is my go-to. I digest it really well. So I always run with a handheld or a pack with flasks, and I have gels on me. And I will say, and you may have experienced this too for longer runs, when I get to that kind of maybe starting to feel like I can't stomach sweets anymore, real food is actually more. You may have to stop a little bit, but like you get to an aid station, at a 50 miler or 100 miler, it's late in the day or the middle of the night in a hundo, and it's like maybe it's cold, whatever, and they've got like burritos or pizza. Like, oh yeah,
Chicken
chow
soup,
down. Those are the
rice.
rice, but yeah, complex carbs, savory foods, those are more digestible, and they obviously provide a longer acting. And again, all of this is contingent on, what kind of, I take a bolus of, now I just switched to Traceba, but I've been on Lantus forever in the morning. So I cut that usually like in half to 2/3 before a really long run. If you're on a pump, the whole recipe is just dependent on your own body, your insulin regimen. It's like so many fueling, um, things, but the staples for me are gels that I can stomach, and
Yeah.
a handheld or a pack that usually has some kind of carbs, in the fluids.
I do carry a little bag of Haribo gummy bears too, more for a mental thing. Not for sugar purposes, just like this sucks. I'm at mile like
Yeah.
40. I need
Yeah.
something to snap my head out of it, and I'll chew on a couple gummy bears.
That's the
Yeah,
chocolate for me, Chris, but unfortunately, I've noticed that sometimes chocolate melts, so I've been recently getting, like, the Hershey's protein bar, so it's only, like, half melted, I still got a protein bar out of it.
the baby Snickers bars, the mini ones,
Yeah.
they're wraps, they get melty, but yeah, you can keep them in your pocket and chow down.
Yeah.
Those are a good source of a lot of sugar, but also it's got some nuts, it's got some other stuff in there
Yeah.
to keep me going.
So, Joe, what about you?
Yeah, so I think, Andy, you hit it, and sometimes it's interesting because it's nice to know that, Andy, you're on MDIs. I don't speak with a lot of people who are on multiple daily injections, and not that it's a different condition with a different management style, because it's the same condition, but it's almost a different perspective you have to take into how you manage the insulin during an exertion like this.
Totally.
So I
And
can't
on
say
really
any.
long runs, I will run with a bottle, like with a little bit of humulin, regular insulin, and a syringe, like in a baggie stuck in my pack or in one of my pockets. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, you've got to
yeah,
do that.
and just in case you need it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I haven't run any more than 26.2, but I will give you kind of my fueling strategy for this week, and then my fueling strategy for the recent 26.2 was, you hit it on the head, Andy, with the complex carbohydrates. I usually take a bunch in the day before. So the day before my run, I would say like around 1 o'clock, I will have a feast. So that is a boatload of vegetables. And then I'll have a protein, my favorite protein. It's kind of like the pick me upper, Chris. I'll have like a steak, and I just won't be afraid of eating too much. And then every night for dinner, I usually have around 80 grams of complex carbohydrates. I'll have that at one, perhaps more. Maybe I'll have 100 grams of complex carbs, and that's bulgur or farro. 2 nights before, I'll have whole grain pasta. And that's what I did before the most recent 26.2. And then, because I'm on MDI, instead of the pump profile, what I do is the night before. So I split my doses of Lantus. I do one in the morning, one at dinner, and then one at night. It's on a sliding scale of depending what my blood glucose levels are.
Okay.
I will only, before the race, I'll only have one reduced setback basal dose. So I'm already waking up not with high blood glucose levels, but with just less basal. So I'll use bolus to kind of control and keep me within range. I like starting. So I started around. So I woke up, the most recent one, I was at like 80 milligrams per deciliter. And then, because I didn't have my morning basal dose, by the time I got to the start line, I was already at 135. I had a couple Brazil nuts, a couple pumpkin seeds, not a lot of food on me, and it already rose that much, which to me is
Yeah.
great. So right before the run, I downed a banana and then took off. Because of stress, because of less insulin, it seemed that I rose right away. So I went up into the 200s. And normally I'll start to see a change between 5 to 10 miles. But this specific one, I didn't see a change. But for me, it's like my blood glucose will get to a certain point, probably from the banana and from the stress levels, from the lack of sleep, of excitement, and it will go high, but I don't react with any insulin because I know if I keep going, it starts to drop almost instantly. So I'll say I think it was around like 13.1, I hit my peak. And then I started to see it going down. Now my CGM, I start to see it going down, and it's almost like my CGM says I'm in the high like 190s, but then I start with the glucose gels. So I use the GU energy gels. It's like 8 carbs per square. So I start eating those. Even though the CGM says it's 190, I'm almost ahead of the curve, because by mile 16, I was back down to 98. So it was
Wow.
like, and I knew I was dropping that quickly. So it's then I eat, and it's almost like, so for the 50K, 16 would be halfway through. So my plan is to kind of refuel and recarb up. By
Are
the
you watching the arrows? That's what you're reacting to?
I was it was kind of the arrows. It was like the G6 doesn't do as great of a job as the G7. I'm on the G6 with the arrows. It kind of gives you a circle it doesn't know what your body's doing. So it wasn't telling me I was going low yet, but I could almost anticipate it, again, by those training runs.
I'd rather
Um,
have core arrows than the G7 not working.
Yeah, it stayed accurate. It stayed accurate the entire, and I took a glucometer with me. This was like self-imposed. I wasn't I, This was training for the 50K. So I wasn't worried about time. I stopped. I checked my blood sugar with the glucometer just to see how accurate the CGM was. I was having other electrolytes with me, so I had like the Element stick with me. So I was drinking water like crazy. I was stopping and pausing to eat. I was practicing because I'm learning in the ultra world. You can eat on the run instead of stopping and eating. You can stop and walk and eat. So I was practicing that further on, and I
Eat as you
ended
walk up.
around
Eat as you
150.
walk up the hills. Eat as you
Yeah.
hike up
Yeah,
the
yeah,
hills.
slow. I
I
walk the
like to
hills and
say
sprint the downs.
ultras are just trail runs to your next meal. That's all they are.
Yeah. So that was
Yeah.
it was kinda, and again, it was like it was reacting to what my body was doing on that day. Like, I had a prediction of where I was going to start, and then I could tell you that I went for a 10-mile run the other day. I had a banana, my blood glucose started off at 100, went to 140, and went back down to 80 by the end of the 10-mile run. That didn't
I'm
happen on a
sure.
marathon day, you know?
Right. I have two insulin questions for you, Joe.
Mhm.
So one is you woke up in the morning, not high at all, and then it was kind of actually trailing or in 135, and then it trailed off into the 90s before race. Um, had you taken the third dose of Lantus the night before, as usual, or was it a cut dose?
So, I'm trying to remember. I delayed my second dose,
Okay.
and I took that, so I only had 1 dose going in me.
Okay, but there was some residual Lantus because it's got a
Yeah, there
fairly
was
long
about
action
so
site.
I'm usually on a sliding scale between 20 and 30 units of Lantus per day, and
Uh-huh.
I had about 10 units, so that's
Got
more
it.
than a 50% cut.
And then I have one question about your big carb fueling the day or 2 before.
Mhm.
So you feel like you're storing up your glycogen stores, but are you covering with short-acting insulin so that you are not running super high?
Yeah, totally.
And just forgive my ignorance on this, so if you
Yeah.
do that and your blood glucose is staying normal, even though you're kind of hypercarbing, is it still helping store glycogen even though your blood sugars are running level? Like, do you come to the race day
Yep.
more fueled if your blood glucose has been I just don't
I'd like
understand it.
to For me, yes, I think scientifically, I'm not qualified to answer a global yes, but I
Okay.
do think, yeah, so and the reason why I eat it early is, 1, so I can react more if I needed to correct, I could correct and not have to correct and go to sleep and be worried about when my levels are gonna happen, like, when I'm sleeping, but also because at 1 o'clock, I had more Lantus in me. So then my reaction is go to the blood to the
Yeah.
rise of the carbohydrates is gonna be more like a normal as I would see at normal dinner time before, like, a non-race day. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Project Insulation, curated Type 1 backcountry expeditions to help build confidence and independence in Type 1s. Too many Type 1s live with these limiting beliefs that they either can't, they shouldn't, or it's going to be too difficult for them to manage their diabetes. What if I don't have enough insulin? What if my sensor comes out? What if I go low on the trail? The whole purpose of Project Insulation is to take you and submerge you into a community of people who live with Type 1 so they understand you, they deal with the same thought processes and the same difficulties that you deal with every day, and they take you and show you together that you can do anything that you want to do with Type 1. We would like to expand Project Insulation into 3 tiers: beginner, intermediate, and expert level trips. Our beginner trips are going to be your overnight to maybe 3-day trips with 2 overnights. The intermediate trips are what we're kind of running now. They're more for people who have some outdoor experience, who want to push and challenge themselves to do harder things. And as we open to expert level, we're looking to take a group of Type 1s to do crazy expeditions, things like summiting Denali as an all Type 1 team. Hiking also teaches me about the things that work and don't work for managing my Type 1 diabetes.
Head to projectinsulnation.com for more information. Don, what about you? What is your fueling strategies?
I always have stories. So that my story regarding fueling is that back during the I think it was the Texas run, I was running with someone for a little while, and we had just crossed I-20 to the north side to grab a quick lunch at some burger joint. And, I ordered the burger with, 50 grams of carbs plus fries, plus a mini shake, plus a full sugar soda. And my plan was to have a little bit of those and kind of eat as I started walking again. And he said, "My God, that is the worst possible thing you could have ordered. Think about what that's going to do to your blood sugar." And I'm like, "Well, first of all, I need the calories. Second of all, I need the carbs. I need the fat. I need the salt. I need the meat. I need the protein. Why is this a bad idea?" And then it kind of occurred to me. I think it was Chris that said, that ultras are basically family picnics with a little running thrown in or something
Yeah.
like.
That's
Yeah.
eating parties with a little running mix.
Yeah, I don't remember who originally said that, but that really resonates with me. My version of that is I was once at a family picnic and an ultra run broke out. But I think the truth is that the main reason that junk food is bad is that people don't use anything that's in their food. It's not bad if you're out there working like a horse. Sorry, I'm just checking my pump here to make sure everything's fine, which it is.
You're not allowed to do that, Don. Just kidding.
I'm not supposed to look off screen.
Not on a diabetes podcast.
Yeah, I don't know. My phone is telling me I'm at 180, and I was going to excuse myself to take a couple of bolus, but I'll wait. I'll wait and see what it does.
No worries. I've got mine up where I can see it. I'll leave it at that. No, it's like 157 or something. But anyway, with regards to fueling, one thing I did learn as I moved from 5Ks and half marathons and things like that to longer distances is that gels really don't work. Not the honey stingers or the goos or whatever. Once the distance is above really probably 20 miles or so, you can get by with them at marathons, but I've known a lot of people who basically had an emergency bathroom stop around mile 18 because it was starting to work its way through their system, and they had become very fluid. I'm just going to leave it at that. And I kind of learned quickly that real food is a good choice. And while I have focused more on super long distances, and I've only run, a few actual races that were over 100 miles. My strategy has been that when your body is telling you to eat. Get what you're craving. Keep moving if you can, but slow down. I mean, part of the deal with walking is not just that it makes the food easier to eat, but it activates the parasympathetic nervous system and drops stress hormones and allows your body to actually store that fuel as opposed to dumping into the bloodstream. And, eventually you're going to tap out of glycogen or something like that if you don't slow down and sort of fuel and rest along the way. So one of the lessons that I kind of learned with regard to fueling is that you can't really consider it separately from rest or slowing down or things like that. That it has to be part of an integrated strategy. And that it does have to be the things your body needs, like fat and protein, need to be part of it once you're over a certain mileage. I think for the big run, I ate whatever I could. I was burning through probably 5,000 calories a day, and on the Texas run, I had lost 12 pounds. So I was trying very hard not to lose weight. But I know it sounds like blasphemy, but I would eat whatever I could put in my mouth.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's a question, Don, is when that happened, was your body, I don't want to say starving, but in such need of those carbs and calories and everything that goes into that food? What were you seeing with your blood glucose? Was it more steady than you thought, or was it
Yes.
still fluctuating?
Yeah, no, it was much more steady.
This goes back to the build. If you want to build off of here, it goes back to the fear concept that we were talking about earlier. Of like a lot of people would be fearful of doing that because of the fluctuations or messing up or higher blood sugar.
Yeah, I had a very interesting experience. It was in 2024, I think it was. The first year I successfully completed a Deca Ironman, and I was stopping and getting like a big full sugar big gulp, like every 40 miles or something like that. And I would have thought that that would have knocked my sugar for a loop, just taken that much that fast. The reality was that I was burning through it. And the rate at which I drank the liquid and the rate at which I absorbed the sugar kind of balanced out very, very fortunately. Um, and I found that actually worked okay. What I had to do to burn through a big gulp of, full sugar Mountain Dew or whatever was quite a lot. But the point was I was burning through it. And I think as long as things are in balance, and by that, I don't just mean avoiding highs and lows, but avoiding things that lead to highs and lows. So stopping for too long, not stopping at all, and letting the stress get the better of you, those things are regulatory as well.
I would just jump in, and it's interesting having been running for close to 30 years and running ultras, I think 17 seasons now without having missed at least one ultra, and usually a 50K, 50 miler or more in every year. I'm still learning and listening to Don. And I know I've known this for a long time, but one of my problems, so for anyone listening to the podcast who's trying to learn, don't follow in my footsteps, necessarily, no pun intended, is I have probably underfueled, like chronically underfueled. So probably not having enough insulin on board, maybe not covering it all, and as a result, not taking in. And I've known this, and now they're saying, you were saying earlier, Chris, like taking in it was like 40 to 60, like somewhere putting yourself around at least 50 grams of carbs per hour. But now, ultra runners, the winning ultra runners, non T1s, are what's this 90 to 120 grams of carbs per hour, and you look at what the guys were eating at the Tour de France. I don't know if any of you were following it this week, the last few weeks. Incredible, like thousands and thousands and thousands of calories being pumped in. So our bodies, whether we're T1 or not, need all those carbs to fuel. And that's why I'm listening to Don saying, you drank an entire big gulp. Like my sugar would, I don't know, I would think my sugar would be probably, I don't have enough insulin on board, and I'm also probably underfueled. So if you look at the calories I take in during an ultra versus how much Strava tells me I'd probably burn, yeah, I'm probably underfueled. And that's probably something I need to work on, is maybe micro dosing more or mini dosing and taking in more fuel as I go. Because there have been times where I feel pretty flat, and I'll have a gel and I'll feel a little better, but my sugar's at 200. So yeah.
Do you think there is a difference between all of these like new, I want to call them protein bars, but they're bars in general with high calories, high carbs, high proteins, versus the old school, like the race I'm going to on Saturday will have burgers at their aid stations.
PBJs, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think the hype is real about all this new stuff that's coming out?
I think it's another phase.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, your body's going to break down the food and take the minerals and elements and everything that it needs and pump it into your bloodstream. It comes down to preference. You can get into the weeds over the science of it, which is where all the new technology and bars and foods come out. But like even now, today, go to any ultra, you're going to watch all the people in the front of the pack having the soup, the rice, the burritos. They may have those bars for in between the aid stations and stuff like that, but they're always going back to the real food.
Yeah. Do you think those bars are just the burritos, just in bar format? Not flavored,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's the same content in theory.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, my personal opinion about that, I think it's just a lot of marketing and ways to create some hype and upsell for a company. Because at the end of the day, your body's going to break down whatever it's ingesting the same way. Right?
And ultimately, what you really need to fuel over the long haul, yes, the carbs and, like we were saying, Don, fat, protein, those are helpful, but ultimately carbs are really, and this is what the science is telling us too, carbs are really where it's at. My best fueling memory of any ultra I've ever run was the Vermont 100 mile 10 years ago. My stomach pretty much kind of shut down about at the halfway mark, and as night fell, and I couldn't really take in much. Every aid station had broth and noodles. In every aid station, I would chug down 2 cups of broth and noodles, stomached it well, it fueled me, and it was one of the best races I've ever had, and I felt good through the night on broth and noodles and maybe some electrolyte drink. And, sometimes it can be really simple and it can do really well. It doesn't have to be
That's-
newfangled dietary technology.
I-50 was the same way. I put the chicken broth in the white rice to make the rice more palatable.
Exactly. Yep.
When you're running that far of distance, Chris, I guess for you over a 50K, so over 32 miles, but Andy and Don, when you're running over like the 75-mile mark or running for days on end, is there a point where what you're fueling is consistent and your blood glucose reaction is consistent, or what is your blood glucose doing after you keep on pushing yourself more and more and more? Does it have a trend, or do you lose that trend? Do you again have to react on the fly, or do you know oh, I'm in a rhythm, it's going to do this for the next couple of days or hours or miles or whatever?
Andy, you want to go first, or you want me to go on that one?
I mean, I can go first. I think my answer is quick, which is I'm not sure. Um, I've never done multi-day runs, and I'm really interested, Don, to hear what you have to say. The closest to multi-day run was last August. I went to Mont Blanc, and we did the 100-mile circuit, which has about 32,000 feet of vertical. But it was over 6 days, and it was, relatively speaking, and it was a lot of hiking up and running down. There were some big days with big vert, some shorter days. And yeah, I don't know that I really noticed a trend over time. It was also, we stopped in the evening, had real meals, had real breakfast. So it was a little more like going out for a long training run every day than it was an actual multi-day race. They were not 30 or 40-mile days. They were, more like 12 to 18-mile days at the most. I haven't really noticed a trend. I will say in hundreds, it really depends what you're doing with insulin. I was taking Lantus, and I would carry a little Humalog with me to cover as needed. And I would typically, during 100, somewhere at about the 12-hour-ish mark, I would take another smaller dose, maybe 3 units of Lantus or something, kind of like what you do, maybe slightly smaller though, to kind of help carry me through the night. And it has typically worked pretty well.
I would say for me, the perspective is a little bit different. 100-miler is something that if you're a very fast runner, you can get done in 24 hours. If you're doing a transcontinental run, you can't count on throwing everything into day one and waking up and doing it again on day 2. So you have to deliberately pull back. I think even with people who are doing things like Badwater, some of these races that are super tough and barely over 100 miles, it's the same thing. You've got to hold back a bit, slow down a bit, balance your fuel and your exhaustion level and your energy level as tightly as you can, because any one of those things can take you out of it. My experience on the super long, the cross state and cross country type stuff, was that the biggest secret to getting up and doing it again the next day was to save yourself enough time to sleep a little bit. When I did my first, in fact, it was this run, when I did my first 200 plus mile run, this is really on here, but I was a solo runner that year. I didn't sleep more than 7 hours in 4 days. And in addition to hallucinating, I was starting to eat my own body. And the way that made me feel was just miserable. It felt like I had the flu. I never had any muscle recovery when I got up and ran after a short nap.
Hmm.
Nothing worked. And when the next run I did after that was a solo runner in Relay, Iowa. So it's like 339 miles across the state. And I budgeted at least 4.5 hours of sleep per night. I still ran very close to not finishing, but just having a few hours of sleep meant that I had some muscle recovery in the mornings. I still had to run way slower than I was accustomed to running. I was averaging, I think, 45 to 55 miles a day. We get caught in thunderstorms. There was a tornado at one point. We had to wait for it to pass through. And, the point was that every time you sat down or leaned on a guardrail, or walked slowly while drinking a big gulp and eating a payday bar, it was for a reason. It was to get back what you had lost. If you took a little nap, or like I said, sat on a guardrail, you rested, you massaged your feet, you cooled yourself down, you drank something. It was never, just sitting there thinking about how nice the birds sounded or something like that. And I think that part of the trick for these longer distances is to realize that it's not about running as fast as you can. It's about running as long as you can, as fast as you can tolerate. At some point, something has to give.
Yeah. I would just jump in and say, if anyone was following Cocodona in May, and I crewed and paced there for my buddy the first year of 2021, an amazing place, an amazing experience. Rachel Entrican finished in world record time, and what she slept, what was it, like 2 hours total, 220 total, maybe over 3 days. Very few people can do that. And my buddy, who is an amazing athlete, he's run a ton of hundreds. He was only 43 at that time, an incredible athlete. And he allotted to sleep 3 hours a night, and he's not a diabetic, right? 3 hours, totally healthy, 3 hours a night, and he slept 3 hours a night for the first 3 nights, whatever. And on the fourth day or whatever, fifth day, whatever it was, he completely crashed. I mean, he barely made it up over Mount Eldon and down to Flagstaff. He did, but it took him a day longer than he expected, and the sleep deprivation and the heat also really killed him. So all that to say, most of us are human, and then you add in T1 and what the fatigue and lack of sleep and heat, and as you were saying earlier, Chris, dehydration, which is hard to measure and account for, what that does to our glycemic control and our energy, our fueling is just, yeah, you really. I always think like ultra running, the great thing about ultra running, it's not like, oh, I got to go out and run a 3-hour marathon or something. Give yourself time. The cutoffs are usually pretty liberal. And if you've got unless you're really in a hurry, take your time to take care of your body and go long. Don't worry about going fast.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly why I got into ultras. Like I had run a couple marathons, but like being a bigger guy, I'm never gonna compete for a podium or win any race or anything like that. And it all became like, what's the next step? And pushing into those distances, it was like, all right, I can do this. Like I can run a 16-minute mile. No one's going to care because I'm going to hit the finish line, and a bunch of the people who are running 8-minute miles are not going to hit the finish line. Like all that matters as an ultra is getting to the finish line.
And the last finisher has, I don't know if any of you ever watched the Western States
The golden
finish
hour.
of Gunhild
Yeah.
Swanson. Have you seen that video? This was like
Yeah.
10 years ago. She was 70. She would have been the oldest woman to ever finish. And the winner, who had finished 12 hours earlier or more, like 15 hours earlier, showered, slept, ate, was running in flip-flops the last mile with her to the finish, and a huge crowd following her. It's like the most celebrated finish in Western States history. She was the last finisher. She finished it's a 30-hour cutoff. It was like 29, 59, 37 or something, like amazing. Those are, and at Vermont, at the Vermont 100, they have a special award for DFL. I don't know if I can say what that stands for on the podcast, but you can probably guess. the last person who finishes under the 30-hour cutoff as a special award. They have been granted the privilege of having been able to spend the longest time out in the beautiful Vermont countryside. Yeah, it's a great sport in that way. So don't hurry, take care of yourself, and get to the finish.
And yeah, no, I think that's what I'm learning as in like even with the running a marathon, I'm focused on like getting good sleep 2 nights before. And even this 50K is going to be a day thing. And Don, it's a whole nother league of what you're talking about of like, I guess personally, I can convert this to expedition style mountaineering when you're out on the mountains or on a glacier for multiple days at a time. But even so, then I want to focus on getting as much sleep. I was out in Alaska for a week on a glacier and the sun wasn't setting. My tent mate was snoring. So I wasn't getting a lot of sleep, but I was still getting more sleep than what you were doing, Don, and then exerting yourself on top of that. So it really is a learning curve getting into the ultra world of there's much more to focus on when you are depleted of the normal amount of daily life nutrition, all aspects from sleep to electrolytes to blood sugar control. When you kind of go over that threshold, it's like you jump into a new realm.
It's like a completely different sport. You
Mhm.
know, 5, 10, 13, 1, and 26, 2. You can lay down the hammer and get up and carry on the next day.
Yes.
Once you start pushing 50K and higher, it is completely different than running any of those races.
Yeah.
Yes. And although 50K may only be 5 miles longer than 26.2, if it's trail versus a road marathon, the amount of time you
Totally.
could be out there could be double, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easily.
To paraphrase Miracle Max from Princess Bride, dead freaking last is only partially dead.
Yeah.
I think I saw the one. I think it was the video from Cocodona when the person was like collapsing, but they
Yes.
kept on pushing him up onto the finish
Yep.
line, and it was
Yeah,
just like
I
it's an
saw-
amazing scene.
Well, the last one that they just finished, I don't know if it was Cocodona or the Western States. There was a guy that literally, like, he was rolling over the finish line because he couldn't stand on his own 2 legs.
Yeah.
I know there was a guy at Badwater that was kind of like that.
It may have been Badwater then. It was
Yeah.
just one of the
Maybe.
recent ones. I had just seen it recently. But like
Yeah,
that's
and
always my favorite time in sports is like the last hour of the cutoffs on the ultramarathons. Like
Right.
those people, like they have nothing left and they still get to the finish line.
Well, it
It's
goes
incredible.
back to the why. I mean, I guess is a good next topic, both related to type 1, but just ultras in general. Why do you think it's now turning into such a huge cultural movement? Do you think it's because it's a race against yourself? Is it to show what humans can do? Because I mean, ultra marathons have never been as big as they are now today.
I think
Oh.
one of the biggest shifts in society as of recent has been personal growth and development. You're seeing that trickle down into the much younger generations than it's ever been present before. And in my opinion, there is no better way in the world to find out about yourself and to grow and develop than to put yourself into something as demanding and difficult as an ultramarathon. I've gone into marathons and come out a completely different person because of all the ups and downs. The highs are highs, the lows are low, and you've got to just weather the storm all the way through. And you find out so much about yourself going through all of that. And no matter how hard and difficult it is, the entire 24, 36, however many hours you just ran, however much punishment you just put yourself through, the second you cross the finish line, you are a different person.
I could not agree with that more. I would say all of those things. Yeah, there was, I don't know, to go back 20 years or something, the number of ultra marathons and mostly trail ultras in the country has just and the world has exploded exponentially. Yeah, there really are not, years ago, there really were very few. I think it's all that. Also, once you start getting into the ultra world, it's people who are interested in putting themselves outdoors in nature. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
And the culture is so unlike road running. You know, you go, yeah, runners can be friendly, whatever, but it's a much more competitive spirit. And And, the ultra world and trail world in general is just super friendly. They're like, by and large, here we are, all four of us, right? Like really nice people. They're friendly, they're supportive, they're welcoming. Doesn't matter whether you're fast. They want to give you advice about how to do your best. You have crew there, hopefully, like helping you. It's a very socially supportive environment, and you're out in nature, which is a great antidote to the world as we live in it currently, right? So,
So here's a question for you all. I think that it's a common theme that we've expressed on the podcast today that overall, physical activity, specifically running, that sort of thing, has played a very important role in our character growth and in our mental health as much as physical health. Is there any lesson that any of you bring away from all of that you carry forward into other parts of your life?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Don. Mainly because this just popped right up in my head. Chris was saying something about how, I mean, at least for me, I'm not the fastest. I'm not in it to compete against other runners. I'm in it to compete on myself, with myself, and I better myself by doing it. Um, I think the theme that I try to carry with me into daily life is that if I focus on myself, it's not a selfish act. If I take the time to do something for myself, like go for a training run and train for an ultra and actually do it, yeah, it's just me doing it. A lot of people could think that that's just a selfish thing to do. You're not part of a team, even though you have a crew. But I'm under the philosophy that if you really focus on yourself and you really are in tune with yourself, you can become the best possible version of yourself, and you can use that to better your family. Be the best possible person for your family. Be the best possible person for your community. So inevitably, it's kind of a twist on that it's a very selfless thing to do. If you're so in like self-reflecting, you can be the better person for the world and make the world a better place.
I would just, as an apostrophe on what you said, I would say the only area that I can think of where focusing on yourself uh, is selfish is if you go into your pain cave and don't come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's a good point. That's a very good point. You have to come out trying to better yourself. You have to have that motive to come out of that. You're right, because unfortunately, I do know a lot of people who have just gone into the pain cave, and they haven't come out, and they're not nice to people in public, and it is like they're like a shadow, So it is to that point of like you have to do something with what you learn about yourself.
Now, what about you, Chris?
Well, I had to sit there and think real quickly because I was going to totally say pretty much what Joe said. And, that the next thing that I would go to would probably be consistency and commitment. Ultras aren't won on the day of the race. Ultras are completed in the months of training leading up to it. It takes an incredible amount of consistency and commitment to start and finish an ultra race, and taking those lessons from the months long training that have helped build not only my physical, but my mental, and even you can go down the path of spiritual, building all of that across all those facets of life through those training runs, taking that into my everyday life, you know, bringing that consistency to motherhood, being a husband, my job and everything else that I'm trying to do outside the community, those consistent traits that I show in the training, bringing them into the real world, again, helps make it a much better place. It makes me be the best version of myself. It brings out the best traits in me in areas where I may not have used those traits or thought to use those traits.
It's also like Chris, just kind of building off of that. It's like you put yourself more in a position to like problem solve, and then you encounter other stuff that comes at you naturally during life. So it's not even like, oh, you're being a great person with a bunch of smiles and you're really friendly and you're there for everybody. But like, say if life throws a curveball at you, well, you know how to manage type 1's curveball during an ultra race. Now you know it allows you to kind of slow down, walk, eat the food, analyze the situation, you know what I mean? And just like it teaches you other things that you can carry in your life too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
I
I
agree
think
with that. I agree with that completely. It's, like we were saying earlier too, it requires and teaches discipline, self-confidence, humility, both those things combined, flexibility, endurance, perseverance, and it brings a sense of joy, right? Joy in the process. And even when things are hard, you're at mile, 27 or 77, and your body's hurting, but you're trying to, if you've all read Born to Run, right? Like you're trying to channel that Tarahumara like feeling of joy, just being out with, in that case, bare feet or huaraches on the sand, but like just channeling good energy. And you can be really in the pain cave, but the social nature of it, the beauty of it, it all helps breathe that. And I use the ultramarathon metaphors all the time in my life to myself and to others, relentless, like this guy, Brian Powell, who's a very well-known, he runs the I Run Far website. It's like relentless forward progress. That's a great motto to live by in so many ways. And I always talk about like, okay, you're in a tough spot now, but get to the next aid station. It's just keep walking until you get to the next aid station. And there you can regroup and you will have support. So it's not like, oh my God, doom and gloom no, here you are now, maybe in a pain cave at the moment. And that's the other crazy thing about ultras, especially really long ultras, is you really don't know. And Don, I'm sure you've had this. Maybe you had it with your 50 mile or two, Chris. You can be in a really bad spot, puking on the trail, worse in the woods, digging a hole because like there's no porta potties for miles around, or just feeling terrible, cramping. And 5 miles later, I don't know, you've had a little bit of a respite, maybe it cools off, you've managed to get some nutrition in, and now you're like running again on fresh legs. I've had crazy experiences where after being in a dark place for 10 miles, 15 miles, I don't know, I'm at like mile 85 of 100, and like I'm running better than I did the morning before. And you could never in a million years believe your body is capable of that. So much of it's mental, the central governor theory, and there's all kinds of stuff.
Well,
But
that builds
yeah,
up
so
the whole
there's
thing of the James Lawrence book. I just finished reading Iron Hope when he completed actually 101 consecutive Ironmans. And he was saying that the first 50, it was the same thing when he was doing the 50 Ironmans of 50 states. The first 50 trained him for the last 50. So it's kind of like, it's like, that's what it is. It's like, even when you're running, it's like the first leg of your race is training you for the latter part.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
all
it's
it's
like
all a learning experience.
and it's completely taught me to be present in the moment too. Like the highs are highs, the lows are low. Feel them, embrace them, but know they're going to end.
Yeah.
It's taught me that patience. It's taught me that awareness, and it's taught me to reflect in the moment and stay where I am.
And know the low is going to end. Hope the low is going to end, and hope that the high does not end.
Hope it goes on a little bit longer because it's going to end when you
It will end at some point, but
the
yeah,
high, the vert coming up, the high's over.
I'm nervous about managing my type 1.
Seeing the peak really humbles you.
Make sure I got my sugar with me. Make sure I got my insulin with me.
Keeping everything warm. You don't want to stop for too long up there.
She has a very positive attitude. Hakuna Matata, no worries. But it's going to be difficult for both of us, so we'll do it together.
Being new to married life, this is a great door into bonding. You have your best friend with you the whole time.
We'll see what we're made of when we step foot on Kilimanjaro. T1 Kili, a honeymoon adventure, coming this autumn 2026.
That's Chris, I'm fascinated by the fact that you drew the lesson of being in the present moment. That's a profound insight. I resonate profoundly with that insight. There was, I think it was the day that I got to Disney World, and all the celebration from reaching what I would call the publicity finish line. So it was a run within a run. So wet foot in each ocean was my objective. but to make it newsworthy, it was Disneyland to Disney World. And when we got to Disney World, I realized that there was basically going to be this peak of publicity and lots of television interviews and all that other stuff. And I wouldn't be done at the end of that day. I still had 13 more miles to run. I had 2 more days total of running before I reached the Atlantic Ocean. And it was my first vision of what life after the big run was going to be like. I had spent a couple of years planning the route. We had researched sunrise and sunset in every town we were planning to pass through. We had made contingency plans, and our lives from probably 2018 on to 2020 when we started the run were consumed with that. And I realized that 2 days from that day, it was going to all be over. And there's a friend of mine, I think it's Chris Freeman, who talks about something called the weight of gold. When you win an Olympic medal and you're celebrated and people, trot you around and put you on TV and all that other stuff. And then 3 days later, you get a letter in the mail that says, by the way, your power bill is 3 days overdue. And you're like, man, I was at the freaking Olympics. And you just realize that this moment won't last. Life is going to catch up with you. Tomorrow, you'll be washing dishes just like you did every other day of your life when you weren't in the Olympics. And I had kind of a smaller version of that when I finished the U.S. run. And I realized that it wasn't going back to the hotel to catch a quick nap and we were going to run the next day. We were done. Nothing else to think about. And the most profound insight I got from all of that was what Chris said. It was the present moment. I had to tell myself, in the middle of the interview with Inside Edition, that I was on Inside Edition and I needed to be there while they were interviewing me and not off thinking about the finish line. When I was at the finish line, I needed to be thinking about being at the finish line and not what comes next. Because so much of ultra endurance is about thinking about getting to the next aid station. And then when you get to the finish line, it's like, all right, I got the shirt, I got the belt buckle, I got the medal or whatever it is they're giving out. And now I go home and, sit in a hot bath and go back to whatever my job was. And the depression that comes with particularly long events following getting to the finish is a real thing. And being able to be in the present moment, as Chris had alluded to, helps process that. It reminds you that even when you're thinking to yourself, well, the last couple of years of my life have been a celebration and now it just sucks. You have to remind yourself that you were there for it. If you missed it, it was because you weren't paying attention. And that really kind of centered me throughout the last year or so of the big run, to keep reminding myself that one day it would be over and I needed to be grateful for every day.
I have this intriguing philosophy, Don, and I hope I say this the way that it's in my head, is that being in the moment allows that moment to live forever if you focus on it. And it's once that moment is forever, because once that moment has happened, it has always has happened, if that makes sense. So it's like us talking right now. Once we have talked once, we have always had talked. So in the philosophical terms, that moment is forever, because now for the rest of ever, that has always happened.
Yeah. And I don't know about you guys, but I've never run across a finish line. I literally stop about 25 yards to the finish line and I walk across the finish line and I take it all in. I reflect on the race. I take in the crowd around me. I just process what I just did and I take it all in stride, instead of pushing for the finish line, gassing myself out and missing what's around me when I cross it. I always walk over the finish line and take it all in, just for that reason.
That's
But
amazing.
that's also why they offer you race discounts at the finish line for the next race, because they know you're looking at what's next.
That's interesting. It's like crack, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That's the drug.
Yep. The impulse. But
How
yeah, like
yeah,
you
go
were
ahead,
saying,
Chris.
I can't even imagine, Don, after planning for your Disneyland at Disney World run, all the years of planning, the training, and then actually doing it, like just having an ultra on the table and going through a 12-week training block, then doing the ultra after 12 weeks, it's like, okay, now what? I can't even
Yeah.
imagine having something that
Did
big.
you have that now what, Don? What, like, how long did it take you until you thought of it now
Yeah.
what? Like, I can
Fu-
imagine that must have been difficult mentally to try to deal with.
It was a funny story. I had this, I guess, what I would call an absence moment when I got to the finish line and I waded into the Atlantic Ocean in my meticulously maintained running shoes. I'd spent the last 2,800 plus miles trying to keep the dirt out of them. And I walked into the Atlantic and let the water just lap up over the shoes because I was either going to put them in a glass box and never wear them again, or I was going to throw them out, whichever was. And I was standing there looking out across the breaking waves, and this reporter from Florida Today said, "That's not your next goal, is it?" And I thought to myself, "It better not be." It's really
Usually the swim is first. The
exactly
run.
right. Well, the punchline of the joke was a year later, I did do the 10K at Key West. I had planned to do this whole swim around the island, and I was just not fast enough to convince myself that I could make it with the tides and everything. But, so I did for a year have a goal of trying to swim around Key West. And it's still my goal to make that full distance now that I know I can do the distance without a starting line gun at my head. But it's become less and less important to me. Um, and as Chris alluded to, more and more important just to remember you're there.
I think that's something I personally have to work on because I'm in the midst of I have to do the next great thing, and it's just like I what you're saying, Don, is something that I'm actively working on every day through just realizing, enjoying where I'm at this day because it's going to be different. But I can't help when I finish this 50K, I'm going to be saying, what's next? I climbed Kilimanjaro earlier this year. I'm like, what's next? Like, I'm in the middle of the want. Do
Yes.
you think that would eventually become like a burden? Because the answer to me is yes. It's just like it is a constant craving at the time I cannot control, but I'm working on to actually control. Maybe
I
the
think
answer is to
that's
accomplish them. I don't know.
I
Yeah.
would say from my
Yeah.
personal experience, I ran my first 50K in spring 2010. And at that, well, it was sort of the first one and then a second one. That's a complicated story I won't go into. But at basically the first 50K I'd registered for, I was talking with a woman on the trail or before the race or after the race. I can't remember. And she said she'd previous year run the Tahoe Rim Ultra. Can't remember where she'd run the 50K or the 50 miler. I think it was the 50 miler. She's like, oh my gosh, views are incredible. You've got to go there. And I'd never even been to Tahoe, much less run a 50 miler. And that was 2 months later. This was early May, and that was like mid July. I was like, I am down. I'm in. And I I already had a 50K under my belt. I thought I was pretty well trained. What's another, 19 miles? And and I trained up for it and I booked it and I went out there and I finished it. It was not easy, but I felt really good about it. And I was very much in the want stage. And I can't remember if that fall I might have done another race. And yeah, for a few years, I was really on the like, this is new. I think the next year I ran 50K and definitely another 50 and then 100K, my first 100K, and then a 50 miler. And yeah, I was really very much all in. I was also younger and faster than I am now by quite a bit. And then over time, that did ease. I still had goals that I wanted to do. I was in the Western States lottery. I got to get my lottery qualifier for this year, or whatever. And eventually those things went by the wayside. And I've gotten to now 17 years later, I'm in a much more comfortable, not like want. I still have thoughts about doing another 100, but I'm not sure if it'll happen. And I'm really trying to focus on the present. We were talking about this before. Like, I go out for a run for an hour and it's a beautiful day and I'm in the woods and I'm super happy. And that really is my focus now. I did run a 50K at the end of May. I've got some crazy backpacking trip coming up. That's a whole other story. So, yeah, but but I think early on, when you realize you can do this and the sense of joy and community and accomplishment is so strong, personal like growth and challenge, it's really hard not to be kind of addicted. Someone said like, I think it was like, yeah, what kind of addiction or hooked on it? Someone's like, oh, this is like, it's like cocaine or whatever. And it can be a little like that. So you got to watch and make sure it is, um, adding to, or at least not detracting from your personal life, your family, and your work, and that it's actually adding to it. It takes time for sure, but that it's also value added.
Yeah, and you're still young, Joe. You're right where you need to be. You're 10 years younger than me.
I'm still trying to be the guy. Yeah, well, that's actually my next question for all you guys is that something that's just a perspective that you grow over time, or are there, and this is different for each person, are there actual practices that you do? Like Andy, you said run through the woods and enjoy the moment. Don, you said stopping and letting the water hit your feet. Chris, you said stopping and walking to the finish line. In daily life that perhaps our listeners could take away, are there specific practices that you do either daily or have done, or is it just like a mindset that you try to convince and tell yourself to enjoy that moment?
I think mine came about when I really started going deeper into self-reflection. I think that there's a certain age where like that becomes something you pay attention to. And for me, that hit in like the mid-30s. And when I really started to like look at me and like what made me tick, like why did I do certain things? Why do I like certain things? Like what draws me to certain things? When I really slowed life down and looked within is where that change really happened for me. It could be a life event that triggers it too, not even like age. Like I also got engaged and was ready to start a family in the mid-30s. So like I hit that point in my life and I had these other life factors where I really took a step back. And that was a change for me.
I will just say very quickly that I ran my first marathon a couple months before I turned 40. I've been running for a few years. I was like, I should probably run a marathon, check that off the list. And I did it just before I turned 40. I didn't run another one for like 5 years. And I only ran my first ultra when I was 46. And that's when I started running ultras. So a little older. And people would ask me like into my 50s, oh, you're still running those crazy long races. You're so motivated. And they would always say, and some people know I'm a T1, and they're like, you're so committed to your health. I was like, no, not at all. It's actually, if you want to be healthy, go out and run like 3 to 5 miles, like 3 or 4 times a week and go to the gym, right? The fact that I'm running like, crazy long distances is totally, it's all about, for me, it's always been about my head. And I don't like running on the road, although I have. I want to be in nature. I want to be in the woods or in the mountains. I stop and look at animals. I talk to deer because they're on the trail. I'll stop and check out the bears. I'll stop, I'll stop and take pictures of flowers and like occasionally when the season's just right, wild raspberries on the trail, wild blackberries. It's always been about just being present in the moment outdoors. And to me, that's always, I try to come back to it, especially now as I'm slowing down and I don't know, whether I'll be making cutoffs at 50 milers or 100 milers, in the future. Just to try to channel that joy that comes from being out there. That's
How
really the
does
goal for me.
that then translate to your perspective on living a life since 3 years old with you, Andy, but with all of you with type 1 diabetes and a chronic illness? I mean, I think it's contrasting, but also necessary. I'm a nature lover myself as well, to go out in nature, backcountry, look at animals, appreciate the way a river flows, and also know that you are only alive due to synthetic insulin. It's quite what you would think, the contradicting. So like, how do you balance the perspective of being here and enjoying the life that you have while knowing that the advances in technology and human technology have gotten you to appreciate this life for longer.
Interesting. I would just say for me, having been T1 since 1967, I actually am alive because of cow insulin. Because in 67, it was not even pork yet, which was closer genetically to human insulin. It was not even refined. It was insulin from cows that kept me alive
So
from
then
age
over your
3.
lifespan, you got to see the progression.
I have,
And also,
but I wouldn't have
know,
survived. I
I
wouldn't have
think
survived past 3 if it weren't for cows.
not
But
the only one who's alive from other animal insulin. Joe looked at me like I was crazy when I told him when I was first diagnosed, I was taking pig insulin.
yeah,
Well, I
well,
couldn't
yeah,
believe synthetic, and this is a sidetrack, but I couldn't believe it was the 90s that synthetic insulin was like, because you heard when you're type 1, you heard quote unquote horror stories of like the image of all the pigs piled up and they used all the pancreas and stuff. But like, I just thought those were old urban legends. And then Chris says that it was him. And I was like, wow, this
and me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here.
Thanks for that.
But yeah, just getting back to like your perspective on type 1 with balancing your love for nature, like what has it kind of taught you, you know?
Live each day and manage it as best you can and take in the good. And some of that, I think I wrote it in my little bio sketch. I credit it to my family and my father, especially, who was a total outdoors fanatic and had no fears about dragging his 3, 4, 5-year-old with T1 with no technology other than just a bunch of sugar cubes on hand when I started to sweat and tank, to take me in the mountains, take me on the trails, take me biking and hiking and running. So, I was very fortunate that I learned, don't be afraid. Just deal. And so that has, I think, always something that's just been instilled in me to be present. So yeah, be present with your diabetes, manage it, monitor it, be self-aware, be aware of your surroundings, be aware of yourself in your surroundings. And there's a way to find how these lessons all sort of kind of coalesce for me.
Yeah, I guess in terms of life lessons, there are two things that I came away with after the last big thing. Um, Part of my experience with the US run was that it took so much of my attention that it looked very selfish to people who were close to me. And unfortunately, they did not have the insight that Chris did, that it is self-focused but not selfish. Somebody had asked me, somebody had said, it must be very vain to run almost 3,000 miles and focus on yourself the whole time. And I remember saying at the time, ego would have probably gotten me about 30 miles. There had to be something other than that driving it. Well,
Masochism.
yeah, exactly. I had to punish myself until I felt worthy. Um, there was a little bit of that, but it was a lot of complex psychology to it. In fact, I felt that I had a lot to prove to my dad, and then when he passed away in October of the year that I started, after 6 weeks into the run, I wasn't sure if I could keep going. Um, I asked myself, "What am I doing this for?" I know it's not for me. I know it's not for my dad anymore. Um, why am I still here? And the truth was, I probably shouldn't have been back out there a week after the funeral. And so I processed a lot of deep soul searching kind of stuff and asked myself why I was so attached to the run when, as some have said, attachment is the root of all suffering. And I decided that I felt that it was a thing I needed to do and not a thing that I was entitled to experience. The fact that I was experiencing it was a gift, not a guaranteed outcome. I was there because we had been lucky enough to have the resources at the time to start it, and had accidentally, if for no other reason, taken the right steps for me to be there. And that made it easier to be in the present moment. But of course, during the entire run, you get to the point where you've invested so much in making it real that when there is the doubt that you might finish, you still that attachment comes back. And during COVID, I had that sense of attachment that I felt like it was my destiny to finish this run, but I had no idea how long the pandemic was going to last or if this was even gonna get finished. And I remember thinking to myself, I've got to occupy myself with something to distract me or engross me in such a way that I don't keep circling back to these unproductive feelings that the run is mine. I deserve to finish the run. And I started planting apple seeds. And I now have one, two, three, four, um, five, no, four full grown apple trees in my yard because I was patient and I watered them every so often. And I thought about the fact that there was something in the world more important than me. And I think that helped. That was a kind of a life lesson. It helped me remember that, um, the run was just another chapter of my life. Type 1 was just another thing about me. I wasn't a victim. It didn't define me. The only thing that defined me were the choices I made that day. Everything else was either history or a dream as yet unrealized. And that was a really, really hard lesson for me to learn. Partway during the run, I became temporarily estranged from some family members who felt like I wasn't showing up for them. And having to face the fact that there was a kernel of truth in all of that, and yet I wasn't wrong to go do the run. It gave me a perspective that, things are just what they are. And everyone is equally entitled to have an opinion, and rather than mock it or set it aside or deny whatever truth might be in it, it's important to reflect upon what other people's truths are. And one thing I realized in the process of doing the run was that, yet it was one more occasion where I was drawing attention to myself and I was on the news and, getting custom Mickey Mouse ears from the president of Walt Disney World. And everyone just viewed that not the way that I did, which was, oh my God, I finally got here. I can't believe this happened. They viewed this as just one giant suck for media attention. And the truth is, it was probably a little bit of both. And the life lesson I drew from that is that not everyone sees everything the same way. You have to be focused on your truth and on what you do with that truth every day that you wake up. Because otherwise, you can get down a rabbit hole of feelings or looking back on the life you had and not realizing you still have life and a whole bunch of other things that are very negative.
That's extremely powerful. I mean, there's two things I take away from what you just said there, Don, is one, there's multiple in a condition where there's so many different management styles. I see all the time arguments over what management style is the best, and the true answer is what works for you. So there is multiple truths for how you manage a chronic condition like type 1 diabetes. But two, I remember when you first came on the podcast and you were talking to me about a kid that you saw with a sign. What you have done for type 1 diabetics just to show that you could do it has deliberately inspired a world of type 1 diabetics. I mean, what the top mission that why we're all here talking today is the hopes that somebody will listen to this and run, no pun intended, but run with it. So it's almost like you're right, Don. You're throwing a pebble in the lake, and that ripple is it's gonna hit the water, and it's gonna affect a bigger scheme than just you. There is a higher power to this, and the one act that you did, while yeah, it's something that you wanted to do, it's kind of it was a selfish thing that you wanted to achieve this goal, but what you have done to inspire Andy, for Andy then to inspire Chris, for Chris to then inspire me. It creates a chain reaction and a domino effect that, quite frankly, we need more of specifically regarding type 1 diabetes, like I I call out to see I want to see more inspiration with this condition rather than victimizing people with this condition. I want to see more people just go out there and say, "Hey, I can do this with type 1 diabetes," rather than saying my life sucks because I have type 1 diabetes, but
Yeah.
also to the greater world in general, because we in a time right now we just need this kind of positivity and this inspiration just to show that humanity can be good and can do some really cool, unique, positive things on this planet.
Carry off what you said, Joe. Yeah, role models. I hadn't thought about this at all as part of this podcast or any, I haven't really thought about it in a really long time, but role models for all of us, but especially with T1 can be super positive. And you're making me flash back to when I was really little and I'm going back to like the late 60s and early 70s. Two people stand out in my mind who were famous people who were known to be type 1 diabetics who so one was Mary Tyler Moore, who is not an athlete as far as I know, but she was a super famous actress. And, I used to watch the Dick Van Dyke Show, which is, I think was before I was even born, but the reruns were on. It's black and white. Bobby Clark, an NHL hockey player who was a type 1, and he was a professional athlete. So I was like, wow, like a professional athlete with type 1. That's awesome. And now we've got team, whatever they call it, and Novo Nordisk. I don't know what the pro cycling team is now. But yeah, all T1s, and there are more and more things going on like that. So, I never thought about folks like us as being role models or whatever. But yeah, it was super inspiring to know, like, wow, there's a professional athlete who's a T1. It was like amazing to me.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I don't even know how I'm going to follow up what Don just said. Like, that was just a straight mic drop moment. Like, you can just end the podcast right there. But I guess for me, like, I can resonate with what both of you said. It kind of like, for me, I can piecemeal from both of you to kind of where it goes for me. Like, nature has always been the grounding and centering force in my life. Whenever there's turmoil, whenever something's difficult, whenever a decision needs to be made, I find it when I immerse myself in nature. The other side of that is when I need to work through something extremely difficult, or when I'm faced with the realization of something extremely hard, whether it's external or internal, putting myself through something physically demanding like an ultra or some other kind of endurance event generally gives me that clarity in the suck to find the answer. I need to remove all of the external forces and immerse myself in that difficulty to really see the path I need to go through. Um, Doing those things has kind of surfaced what my purpose is through trying to figure out all of my whys, and finding all of my whys. I've been able to kind of find what I feel is my calling and my purpose. So going out and doing these trail runs, these 50Ks, 50 miles, it continues to build upon that. Why am I here? What am I doing? And the ultimate answer that I've come up with is like, you remove all of the wants in life. Like, what is the true purpose of a human? Like, what do I want to leave behind? I want to make a difference. I think deep down, most people yearn for that. They want to be able to impact somebody in a way that makes a difference in their lives, whether it's an individual, whether it's family members, whether it's a community. For me, it's been, how can I help the type 1 diabetic community? I've gone through, I mean, granted, you guys have been type 1 way longer than I have, but through my life experiences, through the moments where I felt alone, through the times where there were things that I wanted that I couldn't do because I was type 1, or thought that I couldn't do that because I was type 1, through the times where I wanted to do something and it just wasn't available logistically for a type 1, I've kind of been able to come to this space that I'm in now with what I'm doing, where I want to be able to offer to the generation behind me the things that weren't there when I was going through it. give them the resources so they don't have to go through the pain and suffering or whatever your battle may be that I went through to get to where I am now. And I think that's what I found through nature and ultra running big time, that I can kind of correlate into everyday life. Like I found purpose, I found reason, I found whys, and I found something that I can give to make a difference to people that come behind me.
Following on to your question, to your statement, Chris, is there anything that, if you could travel backwards in time, you would go try to tell your past self?
I think about this a lot. I would never change anything because of the whole butterfly effect. You know, I have to go
That's the
through
reason.
everything I went through. Yeah, I have to go through everything I went through to get to where I am today. But if I could go back and tell my 14, 15-year-old self something, it's going to be like, just keep your head up. You're going to go through dark times. You're going to go through good times. Things are going to change like a pendulum, but you will get to the outcome that you want if you stay consistent and persistent in what you're doing.
Yeah. Joe, what about you?
I mean, I think there we don't have to get too much into the details here, but there was an instance where I was one decision away from stepping off a cliff.
Mm.
And that was before I had type 1 diabetes. And when I started to focus on myself even more, I then got type 1 diabetes. And I just kept on questioning myself those first couple months of like, why? As almost like I was back in that kind of depression of like, well, what's the use? I'm going to die young anyways. I'm going to lose my leg. I'm going to go blind. I would just tell myself, which is obviously not true, but I would tell myself if I would go back that it's going to be okay, that life does have its up and downs, and that quitting here on this planet is not an option, and there will be better. So like if you hit a low, you have higher to go. And I always tell people that the moment that changed me personally was not my type 1 diagnosis. It was when I was in the hospital. And now the mountains and nature were my only saving grace. I say there was two things saving me on this planet. One was the mountains. I needed to get to the mountains. I was falling in love with the mountains. The second was my grandfather, because he was my best friend. And I just kept thinking to myself, what would my grandfather think if I were to step off this cliff right now? And the moment that changed me was when I was in the hospital and I was like, the mountains are gone. I can't do anything. I'm a type 1 diabetic, which we know now is not true. I asked if I could climb again. Doctor tells me, don't even look at a mountain for a year. It's like, they're telling me just like a bunch of stuff that like probably is not healthy for the way my mind was at that time. And it was a nurse who came in and gave me an article about Will Cross, who summited Everest as a type 1 diabetic. And that was the moment that changed my life. I was reading Ed Feaster's No Shortcuts to the Top in the hospital. And it was just knowing that there was life beyond with type 1 diabetes that could exist in this world that gave me a thought in my head of like, okay, what if this can be a turning point for you? Because you don't, myself at the time, it's not that I didn't like to live. I was in love with the planet. I was loved going to the mountains and being in nature. It's that I didn't like the life that I had. So how could I then change that? So then instead of saying giving up, it was then up to me to change that. And as soon as I put myself in control, it was the slow kind of like and this is probably why I love to run or love the mountains, because step by step process. You don't reach the finish line right away. I'd go back to tell myself it's going to be a process. You're going to be okay, and start learning to enjoy the process.
Andy, what about you?
Just to piggyback off that real quick. One of the turning points in my life when I was first diagnosed in the hospital as well, when the nurse practitioner told my parents he's a child first, a diabetic second, never get that reversed.
Yeah, that's huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting thinking about what I would do differently, and I could make jokes about, oh, well, at mile 75 in Colorado, I would have done this. But I think in some ways, it's not so much what I would do. Yeah, you mentioned being 14 or 15, Joe. Yeah, let's not go through my teen years because I would have done a lot differently in hindsight, but I've survived right. I'm here. But that's a whole other podcast, probably not for everyone to hear. Yeah, I think maybe what I would have done differently is recognize sooner just what I've come to learn over the years with age, maturity, and definitely with running and ultra running is just gratitude. We can get so mired down in things that are going wrong, struggles we're having, even blood sugar, perturbations, things are not going, and you get frustrated about it. We all still get frustrated. Things are not going the way we don't have control. Things are not going the way we want them to go. But yeah, just having gratitude for being able to put one foot in front of the other, like you said, and like what I said earlier about the whole kind of aid station metaphor. When things look dark. And again, I've been in crazy situations in long runs where I thought I was on death's door, and a few miles later, I feel like I better than I did 24 hours earlier. Things can always change, and it's a great perspective we can bring from the ultra running experience and life. There are people there to support you. Life is basically good. People are kind, and just try to embrace that as we go through our day to day, whether it's a bad run or a stressful time with family or with work. So it's not so much, I guess, what I would change, maybe as much as what I would, try to stay present with and value. Um, uh,
I think this is going to be a situation where I have a short answer instead of a story, but uh, I would tell my past self that while it is not your fault, it is your situation.
Yeah.
And you got to figure out a way to deal with this and pull your head out of your butt before you lose the chance to do so.
I think that's perfectly said. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier of it is our responsibility now. You have a responsibility. But I mean, with that responsibility kind of wrapping up here is look at all the beauty. Again, another philosophical thing is like, yeah, you have type 1 diabetes, life is hard. The hard parts of life are going to continue to happen, but it's almost like it's the in between that matters. It's the in between the hard that matters. I'm always a fan of like dark comedies of like I love the movies at like a funeral because you see the best people, like best versions of people in those situations. And it's almost like the joke at the funeral is the human aspect of it. And it's kind of like it's the in between beauty of the difficulty. And this can definitely get related to running and definitely get related to type 1 diabetes that makes life worth it.
I mean, it's
Um,
when things are multi-layered all at the same time. So, this is a bad time, but that's the way you're looking at it and experiencing it in the moment. But it's also a good time. So, my sugar's my phone says it's 198, and I've been ignoring it because we're in a podcast. But
Well, we
you
won't
know,
keep you up too much
oh,
longer.
no, it's 198, but, on the flip side, there's another way to look at that. I was like, "Okay, it's when I feel fine, I can go correct it because we have all these tools available to us in the short run. I'm basically healthy." So, everything happens in a context. You're suffering in an ultra, but I have the maybe I won't f didn't I have not finished, I don't know about you, Don, I've DNF'd a number of races. But, and it always sucks. I mean, there's no question DNFing sucks. You've trained, you put into it, you pay money, you travel, whatever, and you just tank and you can't finish for whatever reason. But there's also a sense of gratitude. I got to be out, people tell you, "Oh, you ran, it's a 62-mile race and you ran 50 miles," or like, yeah, it's a failure, but there's gratitude at the same time. I'm able to do it. I'm able to be out here. Was it perfect? No. Was it something to be grateful for? Yeah, we try to like hold that present while we deal with the imperfection. I mean, there's always multi layers to every situation, right?
it's funny you mentioned that, Andy. The first 140.6 that I did, I I DNF'd. Um, it was a fairly stormy start. We had roughly 2-foot chop on the lake. A thunderstorm was still moving through the area when they started the race. And I remembered that I got 400 yards out and I was aspirating water significantly. Every time I turned my head, I was getting a wave in the face.
Yeah.
And I was starting to get on the edge of panic. And I raised my arm in the air for the rescue boat. And I heard the engine rev as it sped off. And I thought to myself, well, crap. And I turned around and swam back to shore. And I kept thinking to myself, good God, we drove all the way up to Minnesota for this. My wife's going to be so disappointed, and a whole bunch of other thoughts like that. And then I found out when I got to the judges' station that 50% of the field had voluntarily DNF'd in the swim because of the conditions. So it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my failure.
Right.
And then I learned that the reason the lifeboat had sped off was because there were two people face down in the water and not breathing. I did have to force myself to accept that I should be grateful for the fact that I had my head screwed on tight enough to swim back to shore. Changed my perspective entirely to realize that no matter how bad my life sucked that day, it was better than it was for those two people.
Yeah. And that's in some way really good for you to have seen it that way after the fact. The circumstances made it easier to see it that way clearly. A lot of times we really have to look within and around us too to really see that, oh, woe is me, but it's really no one died and no 90% of the other people finished the race. It you know, we still have to try and channel gratitude and look forward. And that is part of what long distance running in general, and just living an active life and an outdoor life does, because it does help you to look forward, because there's always the next thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be grateful for the fact that you got to face down the bear and live to tell the tale.
Yeah, exactly. And then start planning your next journey. Maybe
It's
with fewer
about the
bears,
run.
right?
It's not about the finish. It's about the journey,
And I
Exactly.
think that's the power of community around you too, whether it's the running community, family, the diabetic community. A lot of times you need that outside perspective to get you off that tunnel vision for
Right.
whatever it is you're stuck on.
Right down to the tunnel vision, the micro vision of what my blood sugar is in this moment. And you're amazing, Chris. I don't know how, maybe I should get a pump. Although I got actually prescribed one for the first time ever a few months ago, and I went to pick it up, and they told me my copay was $300 for the month. And I was already so on the fence. I was like, I'll wait. And maybe I could just do a little better. I can keep living without it. I've lived without it for almost 60
This
years.
is a great time to plug in. Listeners, please go support the Insulin Act currently going through government.
Yes.
We want not a conversation for today, so continuing.
No, not for today. But all that to say is, yeah, we can get very focused on micro. And that's the beautiful thing about A1C. Like, oh, you have ups and downs. Sometimes you're at 198 and sometimes you might be at 60, but, or occasionally 20, like you said, Don, that's not good. But if A1C is like decent, you got a long-term view, you take in the big picture, you're healthy. That's micro. Sometimes micro focus is not so great, and you really do have, just like you step back and see the grand sweep of the Tetons or some other mountain range. You step back and see on the broad, and just figure out how to titrate the big view versus the micro view. We get too micro focused, and that's also not good for us. So figuring out that balance, I mean, that's a life journey.
Just being able to
I
appreciate a conversation like this today. I haven't even checked my blood sugar in over an hour, just because I'm lost in this, and it's true though.
So, quick question for me, and this is meant to be kind of an opportunity for Joe to wrap it up if he wants to. But for each of you, what was your funniest moment with regard to type 1? Where you just kind of had to laugh at the situation and go, oh my God, did I just say that or did I just do that?
Can it be something I look back on now, or it was like funny in the moment?
It's up to you. I'm just curious about it. You can tell a diabetes joke for all I care. It doesn't matter.
So mine was my Killington race, my Spartan. My pump ripped out in like the first 5 or 6 miles in Killington. By the time I hit the summit, because you had to turn and do the death climb, my pump came out right before the death climb. So I had all the stress of going up the ski slope all the way to the top. My blood sugar climbed up well over 400. This was my first time my pump had ever come out, so I never had the learning experience of carrying any insulin with me. So I proceeded to pull off by the it's not the aid station, but I guess like the first aid guys. And I asked one of them for a syringe, and he looked at me funny, and I said, my insulin pump fell out. I need to take some insulin. My blood sugar's 400. They tried to put me on the back of the ATV, and I took off down the downslope because I was not the end of the race.
That's
I
great.
finished Killington with a sugar of 5:02.
Oh my
I
God.
finished the race. Yeah.
Did you start running faster because they were chasing you, or?
Yeah, I ran down the hill away from them. They tried to pull me off course.
Oh my God.
That's an awesome story.
That's an awesome story.
I can't beat that.
I
It
just say, I
wasn't
don't,
funny in the moment, but looking back now, I laugh at it.
I don't think mine's as funny as it is stupid, Chris. When I climbed Mount Washington in New Hampshire for the first time in the winter, I was packing for an apocalypse, and I had probably an entire like copay supply of both short acting and long acting pens. I had 5 of each, and
Oh
you know
my
how
God.
and I'm just like, and that's newly diagnosed, and I just have it in my backpack, and I have no like, and so like it was maybe 20 degrees, last 10 degrees. I get back to my car at the end of the day. Luckily, I didn't need it from like the basil that I had in me earlier in that day. I was still arguably in the honeymoon phase, so I was still sensitive. And I just opened my backpack, and an entire like 3-4 month supply of insulin is all frozen. And
Oh,
to
no.
this day, I don't think I've ever thrown it out. I have it in my drawer. All those pens just sitting in it. They're obviously expired. They're not gonna work. And I think I tried to like try one afterwards at home. It just didn't work. So that was
Didn't do anything.
my funny, stupid moment that I've learned from.
What about you, Andy?
I don't, it's funny because funny, no pun intended. Like, I'm trying to think if I have a funny diabetes moment either in running or not in running. I mean, things have, yeah, I mean, they're definitely, and again, bear in mind, I've only had a CGM for like coming up on 3 years. So I would have lows that were, and I probably said and done some really stupid things. This is really not funny. I do remember I was at the Vermont 50 miler. Actually, 2 Vermont races. It may have been the same race, but it might have been 2 different races, in Vermont. They might have been both a 50 miler, come to think, 'cause I've run it a few times. And, I came into and I had crew, and I came into an aid station, I forget where, somewhere in, like, the 30, 40-mile window, and, um, and I didn't have CGM. But I had a glucometer a meter in my drop bag, my aid was, and I tested my sugar, and, I think it was like 60. I was like, "Yeah, all right." And I grabbed some food, and I was in a hurry, and I was much faster back in those days, and I was worried about my time. Like, I wanted to be as fast as I could be, right? Not like sit and relax and eat. So I took off down the trail, and my crew told me after that there was like one of the medical people were like, "Oh, what was he okay?" She was like, "Yeah, his blood sugar was 60." I'm like, "Oh my God, like, do we need to go get him?" He's like, "No, no, he'll be fine." And then there was a similar thing at Vermont where I was, again, not that funny, but it was a hard day, it was raining, and I was coming towards the end, I was within a few miles of the end, and I knew I was not feeling great, but I was running, I was still running, moving along fine, and then just like an uphill and then a long downhill to the finish, and I came down through the finish, good time, I felt really good about it, but I felt pretty bad, and I tested my sugar when I got to the end, and I think it was like 53 or something, and like, wow, and I was like, "Yeah, no wonder the last, like, 2 or 3 miles, I kind of felt like crap," but it was still running, and, that's the one thing, it's not funny, but you get used to being a type 1 and running low. It's like non-diabetics train, they talk about bonk runs, you train, they low fuel, and they run, so their glycemic, stores are depleted, and they're running essentially just on glycemic stores and then on very little fuel. And it teaches you to run on ketones. And I was like, I've learned to run on ketones my entire life. So there's an advantage to being a T1 in endurance sports. I guess maybe that's
Little
a
cheat code.
twisted humor story. Yeah.
What about you, Don?
Well, 2 things. And I guess humor is in the eye of the beholder, but I was somewhere around, I think it was maybe, well, 2000, something like that. Anyway, I was in northwestern Alabama, and you're giggling.
Well, mile 2000 it sounds preposterous. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sound like I'm making up a story. So I think it was in Reform, Alabama, and this guy who I can only describe as being very similar to the Louisiana cop on Live and Let Die. You remember the one that says "secret agent on whose side"? That basically picture that guy, and he had noticed me running down the street through Reform, and he said, "Why, where are you going dressed up like a clown?" And I just thought to myself, "Oh, well, best thing here is a straight answer. I don't want to be a wise ass about it." And so I
Instead of
said,
the
"Well,
circus.
yeah, exactly, out of this darn town." Um, but I said I was running to raise awareness for type 1 diabetes and so on. And he says to me, "Well, you wouldn't be diabetic if you just started an exercise program." And I thought to myself, I just told you I'm at mile 2000.
Don Muchow, Andy Meisler, Christopher Roome. I use your full name, Chris. Thank you very much, all. I mean, just to have a conversation like this back and forth, it was fun for me. I hope it was fun for all of you, but it's so beneficial to hear all the anecdotes, the personal stories. I think our listeners are going to be able to just like learn from legends at, not to call myself a legend, to call the rest of you legends, but like at different stages in your life and running career, and just the perspectives, everything that we have covered really stayed true to the first question that I asked today, is the why. And we answered that throughout the entire episode. I want to thank you because so far this is the longest podcast that we have recorded, and I'm hoping to do longer form because I mean, out there's 3, 4, 5 hour podcast episodes. I don't think I want to go 5 hours, but I'm definitely interested in the longer form because you get so much good conversation out of it. So I want to thank you for bearing with me for over 2 hours, staying with us and just staying on topic, and just being who you guys are. I think you really are inspirations. For all type 1s, can learn so much from you guys, especially as we progress in a world with advancing technology. No matter how good the technology gets, no matter how far the therapy methods go or the quote unquote cures in the future, it really is the mindset that resorts back to. And that's something that no technology can do. It's the mindset, is the person, and self-growth. So over encompassing, thank you very much for everything.
It's been a privilege to be here.
Yeah, same here. And very well said with the wrap up, Joe. Much appreciated.
Yeah, it was awesome just to sit and talk in this kind of format. Usually podcasts are interview style. To just have an open conversation with the four of us is a really cool experience.
It is. And I don't know about all of you, but I honestly, and I was thinking about this in advance of this, I don't know if I know any other T1s, honestly. Like, I've met them. I have a guy who's an ultra runner, and I've crewed with him for the buddy who ran Cocodona, and his daughter, who was, I don't know, probably 12 at the time, was there for part of it, and she was a T1 with a pump, which I'd never seen, and that was like, man, I'm never doing that. It looks so complicated, right? And yeah, and I think I might have had a client once, many, many, many years ago, as a T1, but I don't know any others, and certainly know others who are endurance athletes. So it's really great to hang out with all you guys.
Well, we hope more type 1s listen, and that's the goal.
Yeah.
And then we can meet.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys are an inspiration to me, and I'm very happy to have had the time with y'all.
Thank you, Andy, Don, and Chris, for such an in-depth discussion. This is our first episode to cover over 2 hours of dialogue, and you did not disappoint in presenting actionable items for us T1Ds to take with us on our runs and in our daily habits. These perspectives and stories are invaluable. For all our content, please visit t1determined.net. Connect with us on social media. Find us on Instagram, TikTok, and X at T1D_endurance, and on Facebook and YouTube at T1Determined. Please also like and subscribe, and you can leave up to a 5-star review wherever you're listening. Until next time, keep pushing your limits. I hope this helps. Stay strong, stay determined. T1 Determined.